Hi, everyone. My name is Alon. I'm the CEO of ssv Labs, which is the core team behind ssv.network. We are a decentralized infrastructure provider for Ethereum. Started with staking back in 2024 and grew quite rapidly. Today, we are the second largest staking protocol on Ethereum, 120,000 validators. Basically, 1 out of 10 validators are running on SSV today. And this growth was pretty amazing and really focused us on making Ethereum really great. And I think now with the opportunities of based rollups and composability, we can actually unlock something interesting, which is getting validators to help with the rollup-centric roadmap. Ethereum does have a tech supremacy. I think that Ethereum, with its roll-up-centric roadmap, focus on ZK, focus on scale, which doesn't compromise decentralization, really show that it has tech supremacy, alongside obviously having a very big developer ecosystem. And I think that's really, really important. Ethereum is the leader in that, but it's not the case with its token. There is a major divergence between Ethereum, the token, and Ethereum, the blockchain. And I think that divergence is actually quite risky. If we continue this path of Ethereum, the token, not as being as successful as the blockchain, we actually stand to lose Ethereum as a whole. And I think that's a big challenge we as the Ethereum community needs to kind of take a look at, but also it presents a lot of very interesting opportunities. One of the challenges we faced, and I think it's very much connected to the token versus the blockchain discussion, is with the roll-up-centric roadmap, we've managed to have a really solid path toward scaling without compromising decentralization. But what we ended up doing is creating a bunch of fragmentation between the different roll-ups. Each roll-up is essentially its own ecosystem, its own economic zone, if you will. Of course, there are some connectivity between roll-ups, but for the most part, each roll-up really wants to maximize their own success. And so roll-ups like Coinbase, and now we saw Arbitrum launching with Robinhood, those are amazing additions to the Ethereum ecosystem, but we shouldn't forget that those are product-focused, owned by specific companies, and they are not Ethereum directly, right? They are services and products built on Ethereum, but they are not Ethereum. Ethereum is the community, is the developers. It's the idea that it's credibly neutral. And I think that's extremely important to remember. And that fragmentation, alongside the fact that I don't think there's enough value capturing from those roll-ups back to ETH holders, I think that's a major challenge. But it wasn't always the case. I mean, back in the day, there was a really good reason to hold ETH and be very aligned with what's happening in Ethereum. When the ICO craze of 2017 happened, ICOs were the forefront of innovation, what's happening on blockchains, and there was a really good reason to hold ETH, because in order to participate in those ICOs, basically buy into those ICOs, you had to hold ETH. And there was a really good reason to hold ETH. Fast forward a few years, with the DeFi summer of 2022, again, there was a really good reason to hold ETH. And so the Ethereum, the blockchain, and Ethereum, the token, were actually working together, very much aligned. And in the summer of 2022, with the DeFi summer, there was a really good reason to hold ETH in order to provide liquidity or trade and do all of those things. What will be the next wave? What will be the next thing that will align Ethereum, the token, and Ethereum, the blockchain? And I am here to say or propose that security is a type of commodity that is very much needed in this area. And I think Ethereum, the token, and the blockchain can play a major role in that. And kind of the technology which enables it all is the based and composable rollups. It's a new category of rollups which are in some ways similar, but in some way very different than the current rollups we have. They are composable, meaning that they can talk with one another and you can interact between rollups in a composable way, which is as close to Ethereum as possible. They are based, meaning that the sequencing is happening by Ethereum validators instead of centralized entities. And it introduces new technologies like pre-confirmation, which allow very, very snappy UX. And so base rollups are the idea that we can harness the Ethereum validator set in order to actually sequence rollups. And so imagine that Ethereum validators, instead of just proposing blocks to Ethereum, it also proposes blocks to various L2s. And by doing so, we inherit some of the properties from those validators. So for example, security and decentralization and liveness. But also we capture a lot of the value, because if those validators sequence other L2s and rollups, then all of a sudden they get paid in fees. And so we can create this value capturing mechanism from the rollup back to Ethereum, which is really, really interesting. But also we can make those rollups much more aligned, credibly neutral to Ethereum than they are today. Essentially, instead of being them or the rollups being an extension of an existing company like Coinbase or Robinhood, they can be an extension of Ethereum. And still be very much help Ethereum scale and move forward. And so base rollups, I think, are an amazing opportunity. Pre-confirmation is kind of this new technology emerging, which enables transactions on rollup and also Ethereum to actually be pre-confirmed before they even hit the block within 100 milliseconds. That's the shortest time in between any of the other L1s. So just as a reference, Solana finalizes blocks in 400 milliseconds. So the idea that we can start pre-confirming transactions on Ethereum within 100 milliseconds means that the next time you're going to your favorite app and using MetaMask or other wallet and hit that send button, within 100 milliseconds, it's confirmed. It's a very snappy UX, and it's a next level that Ethereum needs to go to. And it's a very clever solution to a really interesting problem. And so pre-confirmation is something we can, again, be done by validators on Ethereum, because the validators are basically the ones that propose the block. They have a monopoly over block proposal for the duration of the time they actually propose the block. And so they can offer those types of services because they are the ones building the block. And so pre-confirmation is kind of a derivation of base sequencing, but also can work on L1. But definitely the big thing about this kind of new category of rollups is composability. Composability is the idea that we can interact between many rollups and Ethereum itself and in between as if we never left Ethereum. It's essentially making rollups and Ethereum one big network, which is very different than the user experience we have today with rollups, where when you go into a rollup, it's its own economic zone. You need to bridge your tokens into that wallet, into those rollup, wait a bit. If you want to withdraw, you need to wait a bit, or use some kind of services to bridge. And between rollups is not very practical. But with synchronous composability, we can do all of that with the magic of coordination. We can deposit from L1, from Ethereum, to a rollup, trade, and get the tokens back to L1 within one transaction. That's it. And that creates just a big network around Ethereum, including Ethereum itself, where the UX is like you never left Ethereum. And so composability, base sequencing, and all of that really presents an opportunity not just to solve some of the challenges on Ethereum, but actually create a better UX. And I think it's down to how aligned with Ethereum it is. Ultimately, Ethereum is Ethereum because of a core set of principles or a core set of properties it has. Decentralization, censorship resistance, and the idea that it's credibly neutral. If we take those elements out, we lose Ethereum. And I think we're on the path for doing that with those brand names rollups. And it's not to say that they don't have a place in the world. They definitely do. But we need another category of rollups. We need rollups which are much more aligned with Ethereum, composable with Ethereum, and drive value back to Ethereum. And I think that will revolutionize not only staking, but also rollups and the way Ethereum scales into the future. This is a pivotal moment in Ethereum, I think, because on the one hand, we have a path where Coinbase and Robinhood will be the face of Ethereum. Ethereum basically becomes a subsidiary of those mega institutions. Or we develop those composable and based rollups, and we create an alternative which presents better UX, better composability, and above all, it's very much an extension of Ethereum instead of a product by a company. And so if anyone wants to learn more, or if they're building a base rollup, we would love to help. We would love to harness the 120,000 validators SSV has to help you, and in general, just make Ethereum better. Thank you.